Way before reboots and cinematic universes, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man changed the course of superhero cinema. See, before Spider-Man, most comic book adaptations were for kids. But this was a film that anybody and everybody could enjoy. Are you an everyday nerd? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. Yo, welcome back to Your Everyday Nerd. I'm your host, Zach Snyder. If you're new around here on Yin, we pull from every corner of nerd culture, talk about anything and everything that piques my interest. I thought, hey, I'm gonna rewatch all of the Spider-Man movies. We're doing the Raimi trilogy. We're doing the Amazing Spider-Man duology. We're even doing the Venom movies. And yes, obviously Sony Pictures Animation surfs up.
These are my ladies. This is Jill. This is my lady Amy, little Susie, Brianna.
Into the Spider-Verse. Then we're going to cover all three of the MCU Spider-Man movies. We will, of course, be talking about spoilers, so please keep that in mind as you watch the video. But in the meantime, let's go all the way back 20 years ago to 2002 and check out the very first Spider-Man. But what makes this film so special? Spider-Man 1 had to introduce Peter Parker to the world, and in doing so, it stands as probably the best origin story put to film.
Wow, great reflexes.
Now that sounds hyperbolic, but think about it. When it comes to superhero origin stories, what comes to mind? Maybe a montage of the hero figuring out his powers and creating his suit? Well, we got that. What about introducing us to the world that our hero will be interacting with? Well, look at that. We got that too. New York City is this lively city filled with tons of interesting people. And on top of that, we get one of the most fleshed out comic book movie villains of all time. Now, it's a little funny because as a kid, I didn't care about the Sam Raimi trilogy that much. I thought they were a little dated, I thought they were a little boring, and I honestly didn't get the hype. But as is the case with everybody, you have to reevaluate your opinions every 2 years or you're just gonna be wrong. This movie, and for the most part, the whole trilogy, is absolutely fantastic. Now sure, we are 20 years removed from Spider-Man 1. It definitely has aged in some aspects. For starters, this movie is cheesy. Just look at Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn. Here's this man who is a psychopathic maniac that rides around on a hoverboard in a plastic green outfit, calls himself the Green Goblin, and disintegrates people while yelling out some of the funniest one-liners imaginable. It's so incredibly goofy, but I absolutely love it. I think it adds a lot of charm to a story that could have been a lot darker and dour. And then there's the relationships. Take Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson, for instance. These two portray what can only be described as toxic behavior. Yeah, throw in the little sparkling emojis. Let me put it this way. If you had a friend named MJ and she went on and on about how much she loved Peter Parker, but he doesn't want to be with her, so instead, she's going to get married to somebody else. But then also, she makes that guy kiss her like Spider-Man did that one time, and then she leaves her fiance at the altar. And then she also gets back with her ex, who is Peter's best friend, who also wants to kill Peter. Mary Jane Watson would have gotten along quite well at Euphoria High. The same can also be said for the trials and tribulations of Harry Osborn, but I say all this to make the point that the writing in Spider-Man 1 is like a soap opera. Record scratch. A great man once said, Spider-Man is like a soap opera.
The thrust of the drama in the Spider-Man comic books hasn't been the villains, they're just obstacles. It's always been how his personal life is affected by him being Spider-Man. That's where the drama comes from.
Yeah, and that's why I like Spider-Man 2 so much. I mean, I think that's the best Spider-Man movie. Would you agree as a Spider-Man guy? Spider-Man 2?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's because that whole movie is just personal shit being piled on top of other things, and
the comic books are built like a soap opera.
Okay. You never get a sense.
I included this bit because who doesn't love Rich Evans, but also I realized why I love this trilogy so much now. Now, I'm not one to watch any soap operas or anything, but there's something so inherently compelling about watching a bunch of characters live their life and have to deal with dramatic nonsense. It's escapism in its rawest form. So I bring all this up because cheesiness is a part of these movies, and I think it has less to do with the characters and the story and more to do with the comic book medium. Sam Raimi introduces comic book isms in such a tasteful, stylistic way. Transitions are flashy. Spidey's suit pops on the screen. And the VFX is so damn goofy that it actually works with the movie rather than against it. And then there's Tobey Maguire. I'm not going to be the first one to say this, but Tobey Maguire completely embodies the character of Peter Parker. I want to preface that I'm not here to debate on who was the better Spider-Man. Honestly, I don't care, and I think all three of them do a phenomenal job. But when I look at Tobey Maguire in these films, I never question the character he is playing. Now, there are a few moments where I question Tobey's acting skills. The voiceover narration at the beginning of the movie is probably iconic now, but whenever I watch it, it is so funny out of context. With that said, the only real weak point to this movie is Kirsten Dunst. It's ironic that her character strives to be an actress because I don't think she's a very good actress, but other than her, every other major cast member is doing a pretty good job. I especially love Willem Dafoe. He's easily one of the best comic book villains put to the big screen. There's certain actors where you watch their performances in film and you're like, hey, I wonder if he's okay. But then I watch something like The Florida Project and Willem Dafoe is more Willem Dafoe, so I guess he's cool, but man, it really just goes to show how talented this man is. And of course, I can't do this video justice without mentioning J.K. Simmons, J. Jonah Jameson. I'm going to bring him up again later in the video, but for now, if I leave you with anything in this video, it's that if you put J.K. Simmons in your film, it will be good. It's just an unspoken rule. Overall, Spider-Man 2002 is such a fantastic comic book movie. It's fun, it's lighthearted, it has some serious moments. I really like that Thanksgiving scene. Fantastic. Sure, it is cheesy. Sure, it is goofy, but I think that adds to the charm of the film and makes it quite timeless. I could talk about this film for forever, but for now, let's give Spider-Man a 10 out of 10. It's a certified classic. A little classic thing in there. I am putting it in the 4th slot of the overall Spider-Man ranking. I like it a lot. It's a fantastic start, but there are a couple of films that I like even more. Anyways, guess what time it is? If Spider-Man 1 was the perfect origin story, Spider-Man 2 is the perfect comic book movie. Now, when I was a kid, this movie bored me to tears. I genuinely did not understand why people like this movie so much. But now, as a big boy adult with, better opinions, I get it. Spider-Man 2 is less this grand epic story about Doc Ock and more of a character story about Peter Parker. Peter is absolutely down on his luck in this film. He's struggling in college. He can't make up his mind about the girl he likes. He gets fired. He's missing rent payments. And on top of all of that, he can't seem to get his web up. Now, other than that whole web thing, I completely get it. Peter is so relatable in this movie, and I can't help but be moved by his decision to continue being Spider-Man, regardless of how it impacts his personal life. In a lot of ways, let's be honest, being a YouTuber is a lot like being Spider-Man. It is my responsibility, my burden to put out this epic content for you guys, and without doing that, who would I be as a person? Now, is this a perfect movie? No, none of these movies are. The Peter and MJ relationship is still compelling on paper, and I think it elevates this trilogy above other comic book movies, but I also can't help but notice that Mary Jane Watson's character is insanely underwritten. I'll give credit where credit is due. She has more goals and motivations than most other comic book love interests, but other than the fact that she comes from a broken home and that she wants to be an actress, I can't really tell you anything about her. There's also the Harry Osborn character arc, which has its ups and downs for me. It's pretty interesting to see Peter's friend become his foe, but other than mental illness, there's no conceivable reason for Harry to find his father's Green Goblin stuff. It's one of the very first Cinema Sins ding moments that I would have with these movies, but I really do not understand how Harry becomes the Green Goblin. This frenemy situation also revolves around a big trope that I can't stand: miscommunication. If Peter and Harry just sat down, like two adults, and had a conversation about what happened with Norman Osborn, this conflict would have been resolved in 30 minutes. Instead, we get this very Shakespearean arc, but less so Hamlet and more Romeo and Juliet. Side note, I actually like Shakespeare. I recently watched The Tragedy of Macbeth recently, and that was pretty epic, but I hate Romeo and Juliet. These two stupid kids fall in love with each other and then commit Sudoku. What? Anyways, Doc Ock. I never was a big fan of this man, but a No Way Home-sized event has helped me gain a deeper appreciation for his character. He has such a tragic story, and his personal connection to Peter has honestly grown on me a lot. Plus, he creates the best Spider-Man action scene put to film. The train scene. Epic action. high stakes, a psychopathic maniac running down Spider-Man. And on top of all of that, Peter saves these people without his mask on. It's one of the only times in these movies where his identity doesn't really matter because he has to save the people that are in front of him. It's such a wholesome, touching moment, and the respect that these people give him, nothing short of perfect. You really have to give credit to Sam Raimi for the filmmaking too. In Spider-Man 1, Raimi uses his style to bring a bunch of silliness to a much darker story, but in Spider-Man 2, he uses his filmmaking to further strengthen the underlying darkness of these events. Of course, he gets all the action scenes right, but then there's just this absolutely horrific body horror scene ripped straight out of Evil Dead. It cannot be understated just how great a genre film can be with the right director behind the reins. Spider-Man 2 is a lot of people's favorite Spider-Man movie, and as I get older, the more I get that. I'm putting this at number 2 on the ranking. I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. What a fantastic film. I love the action. I love the characters. I love how serious it is, but there's still a few jokes here and there. Just such a good movie, and it could end up being my number 1 at some point in the future. But with all that being said, let's get into the fun stuff. Let's talk about... Okay, I love Spider-Man 3. Now, is this a good movie? Absolutely not. It's actually really bad. And yet, maybe I'm deranged, but I find this movie so insanely funny. I promise you, if you look at Spider-Man 3 like a comedy, it will be a fun time. But there are some issues. The producers and executives at Sony messed with Sam Raimi's creative integrity, and we end up getting a bloated 2.5-hour movie with this bizarre start and stop nature that makes it feel like 3 movies in one. Within the first 10 minutes, we're not only introduced to Harry Osborn's Green Goblin, but also the Venom symbiote and Sandman. We then get this entire fight scene between Spider-Man and Harry. It's pretty cool, but then oh no, Harry gets amnesia. Everybody loves the amnesia trope, right? They do this to get him out of the way so that the next part of the movie can be focused on the Venom symbiote. Now, this part of the movie, now this is epic. Every line of dialogue that comes out of symbiote Peter Parker's mouth is comedic gold. When he be dancing in the streets, I clap. And then we'll do later. When he says, "Now dig on this," I lost my mind. When he says, "Now dig on this," I lost my mind. And then we'll do a little. Shout out to Tobey Maguire, man. He really put his all into this film. But then we get the Sandman. This Steve from Blue's Clues looking ass escapes from prison, randomly becomes the Sandman, and then we find out that somehow, some way, he was actually Uncle Ben's killer from the first movie. What a bizarre retcon that adds absolutely nothing to this franchise. Now, I could go on and on about how this guy's character arc comes from the Christopher Nolan school of thought, where like, if you give him a wife and a kid, then all of a sudden he's a relatable character that you care about. But just like Harry Osborn, this movie gets rid of him pretty quickly too. See ya, chomp. And this all makes way for Venom. No, not that one. We'll talk about that one later. This particular version of Venom is ass. This particular version of Venom is ass. Topher Grace, that guy from that 70s show, he also plays the Grand Wizard of the KKK from that Spike Lee movie, delivers some of the cringiest lines I've ever heard. I like being bad. Paired with his atrocious CGI, Venom is never a threatening character. He's just a joke. And not a good one. No, I do like the climax. Harry ends up teaming up with Peter to fight Venom, and it's pretty neat. But the steps that we took to get to that point, it's an absolute mess, and I just frankly don't have enough time to go into that much depth right now. All in all, watching Spider-Man 3 is an absolute miserable experience. I'd give it a 4 out of 10 right now. But rating movies are subjective, and when I remember Spider-Man 3, I think of all the funny moments and all the good moments instead of all the bad moments. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 because I'm a hack, and we're going to move on. We're putting it at number 8 on the overall ranking. Obviously worse than the first 2 movies, but better than a couple of the other ones. Now, if you don't mind me, that didn't work. Now, if you don't mind, it's now time for the best Spider-Man yet, according to Marlo Stern of Newsweek. He wrote it on the back of this Blu-ray himself. I think Marlo Stern should get fired for slander. My bad. I meant libel. J. Jonah Jameson clip was in 2012. After the failed attempt of making Spider-Man 4, we got a reboot called The Amazing Spider-Man. And Spider-Man may very well be amazing, but this movie is not. In fact, it is the only movie in this video that I outright hate. And in fact, this is the only Spider-Man movie that I absolutely hate. Now, I'll go and get out of the way. I don't dislike Andrew Garfield. In fact, I think he has some great Spider-Man moments in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man No Way Home. But this film, the script is so bad that it makes me hate his character. Peter Parker is supposed to be famous for being your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. This is a character that wants to save everybody, even if it means risking his relationships, his career, and quite honestly, his sanity. He's a relatable character that you want to look up to, but in 2012's The Amazing Spider-Man, he's an asshole. In this film, we get scene after scene of Peter talking down to people, lying about stupid stuff, and breaking the law. This is a Peter Parker who has a broken moral compass and is impulsive for all the wrong reasons. On top of that, almost everybody else in this movie absolutely sucks too. Take this scene, for example. Peter goes to a convenience store to buy some milk. Unfortunately, he is down 2 cents from the total price tag for the milk. So the cashier tells him, you can't buy the milk unless you got 2 more cents. So, like a reasonable person, Peter then takes 2 pennies from the give a penny, take a penny tray. Well, the cashier wasn't too thrilled about that. So they argue for a solid minute. And then the convenience store gets robbed by this guy with a gun. At this point, the cashier, who by the way doesn't know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, then asks Peter to help him with an armed robber. Now, Peter reasonably says, I'm not going to do that. Then the guy gets away, and then Uncle Ben comes out of nowhere, fights the man with a gun, and then he gets shot and dies. Not only should this scene be shown in film class on how not to write character drama, but it's also supposed to be the big emotional scene where I get sad about Uncle Ben dying, and I relate to Peter Parker having to get his responsibility all together. It's not. No, this man was an idiot. Uncle Ben was an idiot. Peter Parker was an idiot. And even though Peter's an idiot, I can't even blame this event on him because all he wanted to do was buy some damn milk. And that's just one scene. After Ben's death, Peter seeks revenge and becomes a full-on vigilante. It's not until an hour into the movie that we actually see Peter Pan. Peter Pan? What the It's not until an hour into the movie that we actually see Peter save somebody. And that scene, it's great. I wish we got more of this. I love seeing Peter give his mask to this kid just to give him enough courage to get out of this situation. It's really heartwarming. And then the movie goes on and says that Peter Parker is the only person that could ever become Spider-Man because his parents created the very spiders that bit him. Digging into the mysterious past of Peter Parker's parents and the origin of the spiders sounds interesting on paper, but in execution, it's actually incredibly dumb. It completely ruins the core message of this character, that anybody could become Spider-Man, but since Peter has this great responsibility, it's his responsibility to use it for good. And that brings me to the biggest issue with The Amazing Spider-Man, is that it turns this admirable, relatable character into a power fantasy. We should be looking at Peter Parker and striving to be more like him, not look at Spider-Man's power set and fantasize about how epic it would be to swing around the city. Sure, it would be epic, but that's really not the point. Now, there's a bunch of other problems with this film too. Mark Webb attempts to replicate his signature directing style from 500 Days of Summer. Great film, but the style doesn't work here at all. The romance between Peter and Gwen Stacy seems improvised in the cringiest way possible. The Lizard is a CGI mess. Martin Sheen plays Uncle Ben, and he takes the iconic "with great power comes great responsibility" line and paraphrases it like a 14-year-old trying to increase his word count on his 9th grade essay. The Amazing Spider-Man sucks. When I wasn't bored, I was mad. It's a 4 out of 10 in every sense of the word. It goes at the very bottom of the ranking. We're fortunately not getting worse than this, guys. Anyways, I think it's Philip Phillips time. All right, I have a confession to make. I almost made this video without rewatching The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I know. Why would you make a video talking about 11 movies if you hadn't rewatched them recently? Who on the internet would do that? I can't imagine any YouTuber would rank a bunch of superhero movies without rewatching them before making the new video. That would be crazy to me. Anyways, the first time I watched The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I hated it. I did not like this. I had zero amounts of fun. And then I rewatched No Way Home. I liked Andrew Garfield a little bit more, and I was like, I'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens. And you know what? This movie is kind of like Spider-Man 3 in that it's not a good movie. It's still a very bad movie. But man, TASM 2 has this quirky filmmaking technique where it juxtaposes some of the best cinematic Spider-Man sequences with absolute dog shit. Take the opening, for example. The first 6 minutes are spent on some dumb flashback showing Peter Parker's dad creating the spiders and getting assassinated, and then, without warning, we get the most epicest Spider-Man web-slinging sequence that has ever existed. And then we're thrusted into Paul Giamatti Rhino. It's a whiplash of emotions with this film. It's a whiplash of emotions with this film. It's a whiplash of emotions with this film. Of course, that's what's missing. Without J. Jonah Jameson in these movies, how am I supposed to take him seriously? So this movie has a lot of the same issues as the first one. Cringe dialogue, bad writing, poor characterization. We have 2 villains this time, Jamie Foxx Electro and Dane DeHaan Green Goblin, both of which are really, really bad. I talked about how the Raimi trilogy had this soap opera feel in its character relationships. Well, the relationship between Peter Parker and Harry Osborn is not only written like a soap opera, but shot like one too. I really could spend all day nitpicking this movie to pieces and talking about every little problem I have. I would love to talk about the laundry sheriff scene, but I don't have the time for that. I'd much rather spend my time wisely and talk about all the things I like about this movie. Andrew Garfield. Sure, he has his quirks here and there, but I love how emotive this man is in the Spider-Man suit. The Gwen Stacy death is the one and only consequence that Peter has for his actions in these 2 films, and it's not only written pretty well, but the visuals go hard. Spider-Man wearing a firefighter's helmet is kind of the best thing ever. There's this kid at the end of the movie in a Spider-Man costume, and he's eyeing down Paul Giamatti Rhino, and Peter walks up to him and he thanks him for protecting the city. Genuinely touching moment. And then they play a Kendrick Lamar song in the credits? It's Kino. In conclusion, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is such a whirlwind of good and bad moments that I genuinely don't know how I feel about it as a whole. It's so stupid, but I kind of love that about it. I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10. Catch me on the right day and it's a 4. Catch me on, I guess, the wrong day and it's a 6. Let's put this one a couple of spots over The Amazing Spider-Man 1 at number 9. It's still not touching the Raimi trilogy, but it's better than the last one. Anyways, with No Way Home that just came out, it's now time for what we all came for. Venom! Yeah, I'm going to talk about the other non-MCU Spider-Man movies real quick, because I want to talk about those back to back. So, Venom? It's bad. But my monkey brain kind of be enjoying it. So let's just give it a 6 out of 10 and move on. Okay, hold on. When I first saw the trailer for Venom 1, I was like, this movie gonna be bad. I am not gonna like this. I don't even want to watch it. And then I watched it, and like, again, it's not good. But as a guy that just openly admitted that Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 have funny moments, of course I got something out of this. Sprinkled between its bouts of nonsense and boredom, Venom has some of the absolute funniest moments in the entire Spider-Man franchise. I absolutely adore the relationship between Eddie and Venom. They have this constant banter that sounds like an old married couple. It's fantastic. On top of that, Tom Hardy is the perfect guy to play Eddie Brock. So much of his dialogue is already pretty comedic in its writing, but then Tom Hardy's delivery propels the comedy to new heights. You could call it bad acting. I call it nuance. This movie also has some of the best side characters. Mrs. Chen, love her. She's fantastic. Dan the Doctor, what a wholesome individual. I think that's it though. The rest of the characters mostly suck. There's a lot of random evil bad guys and scientists. This one guy looks like Bill Burr, but I'm not sure if it's him or not. Riz Ahmed plays an evil CEO in charge of a space exploration pharmaceutical company. His performance is fine, but his character is so cartoonishly evil without any of the charm from other Spider-Man villains. And then he turns into Riot and becomes this disgusting CGI color swap Venom. I'm not going to sit here and defend this movie because the plot is played way too seriously for all the dumb shit that Eddie and Venom are doing. But for now, I am going to give it a 6 out of 10 for the absolute laugh riot that it is. Bruh. Venom goes at number 10 on the ranking. I actually enjoy some of it, so it's better than the first TASM film, but it doesn't have the cool Spider-Man moments from the second one. With that said, my good friend, Academy Award-winning Woody Harrelson, has something that he would like you guys to hear. Venom 2 is the anti-Spider-Man 2. Hear me out, I mean this as a compliment. Eddie Brock creates Carnage, similar to Peter Parker being involved in the creation of Doc Ock. Venom and Eddie split up, not unlike Peter's web block. Both pine after relationships they've messed up. Venom even says the words, "Responsibility is for the mediocre." I'm not gonna hide it, of course I love this movie. They removed all of the bloatedness from the first one and created this fast-paced 1.5-hour rom-com where Eddie and Venom break up only to reunite at the end to fight Carnage. Again, I wouldn't say it's good, it's just really fun. Woody Harrelson's talent is wasted on a badly written Carnage, his girlfriend Screech is even worse. The plot is so fast-paced that it has to take some pretty insane logical leaps to get from point A to point B. But hey, this movie also gave us depressed Venom in a nightclub. All of my complaints are void. There's unfortunately not much to say about this film, except for this little segment that my good friend Aiden of Blue Couch Productions, go check the homie out, mentioned in his Letterboxd review.
The best way I could describe Venom 2 is if someone made a typical superhero movie, but then at the last second, they just decided to add a commentary track over the whole thing. It's super linear with generic characters and an obvious plot, but it's saved by Venom hijacking the film and making it about himself. Poggers.
Every scene of this film has Venom making some stupid remark to Eddie, and I genuinely love it so freaking much. Really, all I'm asking is to get more funny, bad 1.5-hour comic book movies. I will love them till I die. I'm giving Venom Let There Be Carnage a 7 out of 10. It takes the 6th place on the ranking. It's clearly more entertaining than the TASM films Spider-Man 3 and Venom 1, but obviously I can't put it above the first 2 Raimi films. Alright, well with both Venom films out of the way, let's get into what a lot of people say is the best Spider-Man movie of all time. When you're left in the dust of a sunflower, and never did too much. Oh, yo, what if I tried to recreate that? Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is probably the best comic book adaptation of all time. I have never seen another piece of media so perfectly pay tribute to its source material like Spider-Verse does. Every frame is a splash page out of a real-life comic book. References to other Spider-Man media is used tastefully. The soundtrack bumps from front to back. Watching this for the first time honestly blew my mind. I'm not joking. I was on the verge of tears of joy. This is a near perfect film. I could probably give it a 10 and move on. However, I do have like one little itsy bitsy problem with the story. Hear me out. I love Miles Morales as Spider-Man. He's great. His family is great. I love the other Spider-Man coming in. The spectacle is at an all-time high. I just think we could have reined in the plot a little bit and maybe told a much more personal story. Basically, I'm saying I don't like Kingpin. Now, I don't know anything about his character in other adaptations. I'm sure he's fine in Daredevil. I just don't think he works here. I know that I'm supposed to care that his family is gone and that Spider-Man ruined something. I don't know. But what I do know is that Kingpin pales in comparison to who I thought was going to be the actual villain in the movie. Prowler. The best Spider-Man films have a personal connection to Peter Parker. And what better personal connection than Prowler being Miles Morales' literal uncle? Miles looks up to his Uncle Aaron. So when he finds out that he is Prowler, it's devastating. I was emotionally involved. And then Prowler dies, and the rest of the movie is focused on Kingpin and a bunch of other villains that have really cool and unique character designs, but I didn't care about any of them because I had no connection to them. I'm also not a fan of the humor in this movie, and I don't mean that the humor is bad. I mean that it's almost non-existent. For the majority of films in this video, I found myself laughing, man. I was cackling. I was howling at some of these films. And Spider-Verse has like Spider-Ham, you know? He's cool, I guess. Like, I'm glad he's here. It's a funny enough concept, but it really wasn't tickling the funny bone on a rewatch. Anyways, that's enough complaining about a film that's literal art. This film won an Oscar. It obviously deserves it. I still love it. I'm hoping that the second one will be even better. I just think we could have gotten a little bit closer to perfection. I'm giving Into the Spider-Verse a 9 out of 10. My issues with the story puts it just a little bit below Spider-Man 2, but obviously it's better than everything else. And now, finally, it's time for When Spider-Man Entered the MCU. Alright, so I want to take a brief break before we get into the John Watts trilogy and talk about the introduction of Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. See, I realized something when I was making this video. Watching all 3 Spider-Man MCU movies back to back is weird. They really don't feel like a trilogy. It's almost like reading issues 2, 5, and 6 of a comic book run. The ending's pretty good, and we'll get into that, but the beginning is a little bit off. I should probably begin this section by saying that Spider-Man in the MCU is a massive feat in its own. For starters, legally, when it comes to the Spider-Man movie rights, they're still owned by Sony. So Sony and Disney had to work together, and we all know that big corporations do not like to work together. The other thing is this is a beloved character at this point. Everybody loved the Raimi trilogy, the TASM duology screwed up everything. So somehow Disney had to reintroduce Peter Parker to a general audience in a way that they would somehow forget about the TASM duology and also not compare it too closely to the Raimi trilogy. Now, did that work? No, of course not. Disney knows that. That's why Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are in No Way Home. The point is that it's insane that I've gotten to the point where I get to talk about Spider-Man movies that exist in the same universe as Iron Man, Black Panther, and the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's honestly incredible. Now, how was that introduction? It's pretty good. Tom Holland's Peter Parker is everything you could want in this character. Sure, he's a much younger version of Peter. We're not getting the struggling with rent and life choices arc yet, but I still love this character. I love that entire first interaction between Peter Parker and Tony Stark. I know people don't like that Tony are in these movies, but you can't watch this and tell me this isn't a fun moment. There's also the airport fight, and the Spider-Man moments are the ones that I enjoy the most. I also have to say that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is my Spider-Man. I don't have nostalgia for the Raimi trilogy. I didn't see the Andrew Garfield movies until a couple of years ago. But in 2016, when Spider-Man was introduced into the MCU, I was caught up on the franchise, and so I was really excited to see what they were going to do with this character. Anyways, we're not doing any kind of reviewing or ranking of Captain America Civil War. I just wanted to introduce the character in this video, so it's a full retrospective, and also bridge the gap between where we came from and where we're going, which is Iron Man 4? Okay, it's Spider-Man Homecoming. And here's the thing. Making this video has been so much fun. It's been really cool to rewatch all the Spider-Man movies, and I got into the script writing, and I've enjoyed every single bit of the process. Then I get to this point, and because of the stupid internet, I have to think critically about movies that I have loved. Now, I'm okay with that. I have nitpicks with these movies. I have pretty big problems with a couple of them, but it's so frustrating that this discourse over Spider-Man movies, it's like Star Wars all over again. Let's just be honest. It's like Star Wars all over again. So, I'm not really going to address it. I will mention Tony Stark. We will talk about his involvement in these movies, but I'm not going to go into whether or not this is a real Spider-Man movie, or how Tony Stark ruined my life, or how Far From Home made me sick. Screw the discourse. Tony Stark being in your Spider-Man movie is fine. He's not an Uncle Ben surrogate. He's not a father figure. He's a mentor, much like a Kirk Connors or an Otto Octavius. Is Peter Parker entitled in this movie? Yes, that's literally the point of the film. That is his character arc. This kid is 15 years old, he's probably neurodivergent, and he just fought alongside the Avengers. Of course he's entitled, and guess what? Tony Stark takes the damn suit away from him and teaches him a very valuable lesson. That lesson also gives us a top 10 Spider-Man moment. I mean, what's more Spider-Man than that? I'm not saying that Homecoming doesn't have issues, it does, but I'm not going to waste another 12 minutes debating over why this is or isn't a real Spider-Man movie. It really doesn't matter. So with that said, yes, Spider-Man Homecoming is a good movie. Instead of feeling like a copy and paste Marvel film, John Watts made a feel-good coming-of-age movie. I love the beginning where Peter is vlogging his trip to the airport battle in Civil War. I absolutely adore the roughly edited school news segments where they use Comic Sans and meme sound effects. The music choices are all of these cliche early 2000s tracks that adds a lot of charm to this film. Making this a coming-of-age film even added a new angle to the trend of other Marvel Phase 3 films. Taking these creative ideas and elements from other genres makes these films more enjoyable. So as an MCU movie, it's one of the best. As a Spider-Man movie, it doesn't hit the highs as something like the Raimi trilogy does, but there are some great Spider-Man elements here. I love that we get a lot of quirky side characters in New York City. The guy at the deli, the do-a-flip guy, Peter's teachers. We even get Childish Gambino. Spider-Man has such a fun world, and I'm glad the MCU is taking advantage of it. Michael Keaton's Vulture is also a pretty good antagonist. Now, him being connected to 2012's Avengers, I'm not the biggest fan of that. The best Spider-Man villains are the ones who have personal connections to Peter Parker, so it's a little weird that Vulture is more of a Tony Stark villain. But who cares? At least it's more interesting than Electro or Sandman. Plus, that car scene. Absolutely brilliant. It's such a tense moment that not only shows you just how far this guy is willing to go, but also that he does care about his family. This man is desperate, and he's not going to let Spider-Man stop him. I also gotta give a shout out to a Mr. Ned Leeds. That dude's fantastic. Giving Peter a friend that he can fully confide in is extremely refreshing, and having it be Ned is even better. This is the kind of guy who drops his 4,000-piece Star Wars Lego Death Star after finding out that his best friend is Spider-Man. This is the kind of dude who just wears the Spider-Man mask while he's doing guy in the chair stuff, just because he can. This is the kind of man who at a homecoming dance goes to a computer lab, helps Peter stop a criminal, and when he gets caught by a teacher, instead of snitching, what does he do? He puts himself in even more danger. Show the Ned watching porn thing. All jokes aside, Ned is easily one of the funniest characters in the MCU and such a bro. All jokes aside, Ned has some of the best humor in the MCU. The man never misses. Unfortunately, the rest of the humor in this film does kind of miss. While I love a lot of the humor in the next two films, the jokes in Homecoming are pretty cringe. I'm also just not excited about this plot anymore. Vulture's evil plan isn't as over-the-top goofy as some of the other Spider-Man villains. The action set pieces don't hold up on a rewatch. I liked the DC section at first, but now it's just fine. There's also the ferry action scene, which is pretty cool. I still like it. But when you realize that Peter fails in this moment and it's Iron Man who has to come and save the day, it doesn't hit as hard as, say, the train scene from Spider-Man 2. Have I mentioned that yet? Did I talk about how epic that? I did. Okay. I think the biggest flaw with Homecoming comes down to comparison. It's a great MCU film. It's a good film in general. It just doesn't have as much epic Spider-Man moments as I would like. I still enjoy it. There's plenty of small moments that I absolutely love. I'm giving the movie an 8 out of 10. It's good. But in retrospect, I can't help but being a little disappointed. I'm going to put it in our 7th list on the overall ranking. And now, it's time to go Far From Home. Oh, I mean, yeah, that is Spider-Man Far From Home. You got me there. Whew. Yeah, we got to talk about the other two MCU Spider-Man appearances first. I love these movies. Infinity War, fantastic. Best film ever made. I'm not joking. Don't at me. They're also pretty important movies when it comes to Peter Parker's character arc. Remember when I was saying that Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home aren't really a trilogy? It's because of Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. In between Homecoming and Far From Home, there is a 7-year time skip. Now, 5 years of that is because of Thanos, and technically Peter doesn't age more than 2 years, but it's still a little weird. Also, at the end of Homecoming, Peter says that he doesn't want to become an Avengers anymore. He was entitled, but he's learned his lesson. And then Infinity War starts, and he goes up into space, and he just becomes an Avenger. And I mean, I get it. He is fighting Thanos. He deserves to be called an Avenger. It just feels really, really rushed. On the plus side, every Spider-Man moment in these two films are pretty great. I love a lot of his jokes. Plus, look at the Spider-Man moments in the third act of Endgame. Yo, did you see that? Whoa, dude, this is so epic. I gotta put that one on my Time Spider-Man Went Raw in the MCU compilation. So yeah, Infinity War happens, Spider-Man dies, he comes back in Endgame, Tony Stark dies, Peter goes back to school, and now it's time to actually go far from home. No, not me. I'm not going anywhere. New Jersey, are you high? Whew. We really dodged a bullet there, boys. We really dodged a bullet there, boys. I love Spider-Man Far From Home. Well, I did love it when I saw it for the first time in theaters. I still really enjoy it now, but I have a few little quirky issues with it. I don't know why S.H.I.E.L.D. has to be in a Spider-Man movie. I've never really cared for this aspect of the MCU. Take out the stupid government organizations. I'm done. There's also a moment where Peter almost drone strikes a bunch of teenagers. Not sure why this had to be in the movie. And then in a post-credit scenes, we find out that the Nick Fury that is in this movie this whole time has been a Skrull for some reason. Real Nick Fury's off in space doing who knows what. And then there's the insane decision to have Happy Hogan be in a relationship with Aunt May. If any MCU character should have less screen time, it's Happy Hogan. All my homies hate Happy Hogan. Oh, and by the way, I'm watching Seinfeld right now. Bear with me, this is important. In season 7, George Costanza is talking to a friend of Elaine Bennis, and she says that George, this quirky little bald, stocky guy, would be the perfect person for Marissa Tomei, the actress. Now, unfortunately for George Costanza, he's currently engaged to Susan, an NBC executive. So, you know, he can't really do anything with that information, but he does. He does. It's George Costanza. Of course he does. He gets Marissa Tomei's phone number. He goes out on a date with her, and she's eating it up, man. They got chemistry. You think maybe he's going to leave Susan, and then he tells Marissa that he's engaged, and she beats the shit out of him, as she should have. I just thought it was funny that almost 30, 40 years later, Marissa Tomei is once again with a quirky, bald-headed, stocky white guy. But besides that, Far From Home's a pretty fantastic film. This narrative is a huge step up from Homecoming. Not only am I completely invested in the Mysterio plot, but I also enjoy a lot of Peter's field trip in Europe. The humor department has also greatly improved. Ned and Betty's relationship is the funniest thing this franchise could have done. One of the teachers started talking about witches and conspiracy theories, and I lost my shit. The movie also opens up with a tribute to the heroes that died at the end of Endgame, and this honestly might be the best thing the MCU has ever done. And then there's Jake Gyllenhaal Mysterio. Insanely good. They do have that weird thing where technically Mysterio is another Tony Stark villain, but Tony Stark is dead, so I find it pedantic to complain about that. Instead, I just have so much fun watching this guy go to the lengths he does to screw with Peter. His motto is basically gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss, and he does such a good job at it. It's a little strange that they make Mysterio seem like a good guy for a bit, but for the first time I watched this, I almost believed him. So that whole reveal sequence, super dope. And then you got that trippy visual scene. If I was going to make a top 10 epic MCU moments video, this would go on the list. Now, I didn't talk about MJ in the last movie, but she's always been okay in the MCU. I love Zendaya as an actress, and she plays the character really well. I have no problem with that. It's just not until Far From Home that they actually give her enough character for me to care about. I really love that she puts 2 and 2 together and finds out that Peter is Spider-Man. We then get the entire third act with Peter, Ned, and MJ working together. It's really fun, and honestly, it's crazy that we have not had a team of friends work together in these Spider-Man movies until now. There's also some pretty good emotional scenes. When Peter breaks down to Happy about his anxiety and filling Tony Stark's shoes, it's just a really great moment. And then there's the ending. We get a pretty solid fight against Mysterio, only for that dude to reveal to the entire world that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And then J.K. Simmons, J. Jonah Jameson comes out of nowhere? What a brilliant idea. I was instantly starstruck. Honestly, this is what cinema is truly about. All in all, there's a lot to love about Far From Home. As an MCU film, it's the perfect one to follow Endgame. As a Spider-Man movie, again, it's still pretty good. At this point, we're starting to get a few more definitive Spider-Man moments. The ending is fantastic, and while I don't love it as much as I did the first time, it's still a pretty solid 8 out of 10. We're going to put it at number 5 on the ranking, right above Venom 2, but right under Spider-Man 1. All right, now the rest of this video is going to be me gushing over Spider-Man No Way Home is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. This movie changed cinema for the better. Never have I been more excited as a Spider-Man fan than when I went to the... In all seriousness, I am truly shocked that I enjoyed this movie as much as I did. Spider-Man No Way Home not only made me more excited for future MCU Spider-Man, but also made me retroactively appreciate some characters more without any weird inconsistencies or retcons. This in its own right is an absolute miracle. Now, like every other film on this list, it has its own share of problems too. This movie has a lot going on, so the pacing can feel rushed or slow depending on which parts are your favorite. A couple of the villains straight up suck. Some of the dialogue is super nostalgia baity. And then again, it somehow pays an homage to the past two iterations of Spider-Man, propels Tom Holland's Peter Parker into a new character arc, has an interesting multiverse component that actually makes sense, and is also a crossover with Doctor Strange, without making any of it feel forced or underwritten. It doesn't hit as different for me to tell you about how magical this film is without talking about all of the MCU, because when you look at something like Avengers Age of Ultron or Iron Man 2, these films also have way too much going on, and yet No Way Home does it perfectly. I genuinely don't understand how they made all that work. Now, with all that being said, there is a lot to talk about this film. So at this point in the script, I'm going to throw out some professional writing and we're just going to talk about a bunch of things. I can't believe that watching this film made me want to go rewatch the Amazing Spider-Man movies. The fact that they loserfied Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker made me finally love this character. Him saving MJ was a fantastic touch. And it makes me so happy that he finally had some great direction behind him that allowed him to give a good Spider-Man performance. He deserved that. Seeing Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man again definitely lit up some dopamine receptors. I love that they let Andrew and Tobey age. I love that their experience as a Spider-Man impacts Tom Holland's Spidey journey in a meaningful way. And I love Tom Holland's arc as Spider-Man. People have been complaining that the MCU has coddled Peter Parker, that he hasn't had that much tragedy, that he never represented the original character's ideals. And I never got any of that, and I didn't really care because I had more important things to worry about. But No Way Home does such a great job of reminding everybody that Tom Holland's Peter Parker was still a kid. He wasn't being coddled. He was still growing up. And now he has gone through his Uncle Ben moment with Aunt May, which, by the way, hits way harder than any other Uncle Ben moment. And on top of all of that, he loses literally everybody. Nobody knows who Peter Parker is anymore. This is such a wild and interesting way to segue Peter into adulthood. Alright, now let's talk about the villains. I think this might be the first superhero movie to have this many villains and to handle them well. Now, 2 out of 5 of the villains kind of suck. They don't hinder the movie, in my opinion, but they're still not good. Sandman is fine. Apparently all of his scenes are just archive footage from Spider-Man 3. So just like in that movie, he's very bland. It doesn't change here. But at least they chose him over Topher Grace's Venom. Speaking of Venom, at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage, we find out that Eddie Brock, and Venom by extension, got transported into another universe. That being the MCU. So here I was in theaters watching this film thinking, when the hell is Venom gonna appear? He's got to. He got transported here. When is he gonna show up? And boy, I'd say I was disappointed because we didn't get more of him, but I'm really not, because I love that after credits scene went right into another after credit scene for No Way Home, and it was all just a bit. It was all just a gigantic joke. Eddie Brock is drunk in a bar rambling about how he changed universes, and this bartender looks at him like an idiot. And then he goes back to his original universe. And, it's kind of cool that the symbiote got brought here too. I guess more practically, that's dope. I just love that this was just a bit, man. So good. And see, that's why you watch Your Everyday Nerd. Because who else has the balls to talk about Venom when it comes to No Way Home? Nobody. I don't think I've heard anybody else say anything about him. I'm just that epic. Doc Ock. Man, I really thought this dude was fine, and then I watched this film, and now, like I said earlier, I have a much bigger appreciation for him. The fact that he genuinely was corrupted by his arms, and with just the right tech, he's able to be himself again, fantastic. I love that he ends up helping Tom Holland's Peter Parker, and his reunion with Tobey Maguire's Peter, so damn good. Electro, he's cool, I guess. Him getting the arc reactor is a neat way for him to power up. I also like the ending scene with him and Andrew Garfield. For someone that completely sucked in his original movie, I mean, he was talking about blowing out candles because it was his birthday. I'm just glad that we got an actual good Jamie Foxx Electro performance. The Lizard sucks. He sucked in his movie. He sucks here. But the writers knew that because they left him in a truck for the entire second act. And now, this is the part of the video where I make the proclamation that Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, a 20-year-old movie villain, is now the second best villain in the MCU. I will take no further questions. The sheer fact that the Green Goblin is still just a psychopath ready to conquer another world while also being an emotionally resonant human being with very real traumatic issues, and they make him a personal villain to Tom Holland's Peter Parker, you honestly can't get any better than that. And then when Tom's Peter beats the shit out of him, Kino. When Toby's Peter stops Tom from beating the shit out of him, Kino. When Norman is cured from being the Green Goblin, it's Kino. The decision to cure all these guys is just such an awesome idea. I'm very satisfied with not only the way these villains were redeemed, but I'm also retroactively more satisfied with their previous films. They all get much happier endings that don't feel forced, and that's really impressive. I've also got to give a quick shout out to Doctor Strange. I've loved this guy ever since his own movie, and his inclusion here worked perfectly. The fight scene between him and Peter is fantastic. I love the little call me Steven moment at the end of the film. It's just really neat that the MCU is able to do these little crossovers and make them work. Also, Wong. Love Wong. Put him in every MCU movie, please. I'm serious, Disney. Do it. Your stock, right up through the roof. The characters of Ned and MJ are the best they've ever been. I'm glad we get an entire film with them two working with Peter to stop something. It's so cool, and by the end of the film, I feel like they were fully fleshed out characters, and I'll be sad if we never see them again. We'll probably see them again, but even if we don't, I'm pretty satisfied with this ending. The decision to make J. Jonah Jameson an Alex Jones type journalist, it's the best thing this entire franchise has ever done. I feel like I was the only person in theaters to lose my mind when J. Jonah Jameson is selling supplements in front of a green screen. It's honestly such a good bit, and after seeing him at the end of Far From Home, I couldn't be happier. In terms of technical prowess, I'm still shocked at how good this movie is. There's lots of great shots that knock a lot of the MCU out of the water. Narratively, this movie should have been a mess, but it's not. John Watts is a fantastic director, and he's brought a lot of charisma and charm into these Spider-Man MCU films. Michael Giacchino came back with the best MCU Spider-Man score. As a film, I'm just really amazed at how well this worked. I said it earlier, but I was serious. I'm giving Spider-Man No Way Home a 10 out of 10. It was a fantastic theater experience. As far as blockbusters go, it'll be hard to top this. As far as Spider-Man movies go, I think it's the best. I'm putting this in number one. Maybe at some point in the future, I could see myself putting Spider-Man 2 over this. I really debated about it. This wasn't an easy decision. But for now, I'm still living off the high of this film, and I wouldn't have even made this video or rewatched all of the other movies if it hadn't have been for how much I enjoyed this. But that's pretty much it. That's all my thoughts on all of the Spider-Man movies that have been released in theaters in the last 20 years. But I'm not done yet. I have an announcement. I'm working on something pretty big, but I need your help. I want to make the biggest Marvel film and TV retrospective ever. I did my homework. I looked everywhere. Everybody's talked about the X-Men movies. Everybody's covered the MCU and Spider-Man, but nobody's taken the time to watch and review everything else that's came out in the last 78 years. That's right. I'm a madman. I want to talk about the 1944 Captain America serial, where it's not Steve Rogers. He's a district attorney with a gun. I want to check out that weird 1978 Japanese Spider-Man movie. With the new Doctor Strange movie coming out, the multiverse is going to be super important, so I want to rewatch all the old 2000s Marvel movies, even though a lot of them are pretty bad. I still haven't seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Daredevil or Inhumans, and what about that one time where Fred and Barney from the Flintstones met the Thing? You didn't even know about that, did you? I didn't until I looked it up. As of January 2022, there are 243 Marvel films and TV shows that tell a much bigger story about adapting comic books for the big screen. And I want to check out all of it. So obviously this is going to be a pretty big undertaking and I need your help. I need your support to help the channel grow and get bigger and make money and all that good stuff that every other YouTuber on the platform is trying to do. I'm no different. Thank you for 1,000 subscribers recently. I really, really appreciate this. I've been doing YouTube for 10 years and it's so cool that we've gotten this far. Like the video, comment, watch all my videos so I can get monetization soon. I still need those 4,000 hours of watch time, and check out the Patreon if you're interested. But anyways, that's all the time we have left for today. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Your Everyday Nerd. And I promised a subscriber back in 2017 that I would dab on camera. So, the home is Zach. Can you do that for me? 1,000 subscribers? That's so many. I can't believe you actually did it.